Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. We never thought this day would come, but it's finally here, the Cyclocross World Cup calendar. It took me to leave on a trip to France for the UCI and Flemish Classics to finally put out the schedule, so that's why we are a few days late, but the much anticipated calendar is finally here, and with me here to analyze, discuss, give our thoughts is Issam.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Indeed, it's finally it has arrived, and I think we have plenty to talk about.
Yeah, most definitely quite significant changes to the calendar. The World Cup will start on the 24th of November in Antwerp. There will be World Cups every single week with exception of the national championships all the way until the World Championships. So after Antwerp we go to Dublin. Then the only new race on the calendar, Oristano, which is on Sardinia in Italy. That's the 8th of December. Then after that it's Namur. Then into our first double weekend, Hulst and Zonhoven. After that, on Boxing Day, we race in Gavere. The circus then moves to Besançon and back to Belgium for Dendermonde, which is the first World Cup of the new year on the 5th of January. Then after National Championships weekend, there's the training camp race in Benidorm, and then we conclude the World Cup with a double weekend in Maasmechelen and Hogerheide. A quick reaction. We'll analyze it a bit more, but I'll give you a few sentences, maximum a minute. What's your first thought about it?
And the time goes in. I think that when I saw it, it was not a big shock, but it was definitely not great to see the amount of Belgian races and also Dutch races in a way. I mean, it's 2/3 of the races are going to be ridden in Belgium and the Netherlands, which I think was for me at least was a bit disappointing. It looks like we still kept Dublin and Benidorm in it. It's good to see Besançon back, and overall, I mean, it was definitely not a great calendar, far from what it should have been if you look at how they were talking about the World Cup 2-3 years ago. So I think it really mixed feelings, but overall not the most positive feelings that I have when I saw the calendar for the first time.
I'm going to try and remain optimistic because I've noticed in recent days that I find it very difficult to be optimistic about this calendar. I'm going to be critical, but I don't want to be too cynical. There's dark clouds above my head. It can start raining any moment, but I think we've had enough rain in the Netherlands over the past few months, so your job will be to prevent me from being too cynical about it, being too pessimistic about the calendar, but I definitely do think this is the worst schedule we've had since Flemish Classics has taken over the World Cup. It's definitely a bad schedule. The surprise, as you say, wasn't really there. I expected it to be something like this, but my expectations were low, but whoa, this is really, really not it. But okay, let's start with what we noticed. There's a couple of changes to the calendar. There was a lot of speculation. World Cup, we maybe need to change the format. It doesn't really work from October all the way through until January. We need to accommodate for the riders who race road, who do mountain bike. So, from 14 rounds to 12 rounds, Issam, we're now also starting in the final weekend of November. What do you think about this change?
I have to say specifically about, the placement and overall that we are now having a reduced calendar with only 12 races. I feel that is, I'm more comfortable with that. I think also that it's more, the placement of it is more logical. I mean, you go from week to week and you always going to have a World Cup in a way from Antwerp in a way. And I feel that is, when you go weekend into weekend having a World Cup, there is always that talking point, and I feel that is important for the competition overall and for the attention that you can get for sure. And I think that is important, and I see the logic in that, and I think that it could be something that we could see in the future for the years to come. And it wouldn't surprise me if the riders also will welcome this change in a way and feel more comfortable with this. Definitely the ones that are living in Belgium and Netherlands. It will be interesting to see how the focus will shift in a way how certain riders will pick their way, and make the choices between the Super Prestige, XO Trophy, and of course the World Cup. And I think that will definitely be interesting, and will also, in my opinion, really give a view on if this is going to work or not, and if we actually are going to see this in the future. I think it's really dependent on what the riders will do also.
I think you make some excellent points. I've been over this point earlier in the season as well, in the cross season. Yes, cyclocross is a sport with traditions. Yes, you should respect certain traditions. At the same time, cyclocross is also a sport where the date of a race is less robust than in road cycling, even, for instance. Like, the Tour will always be in July. It only ever shifts like a week to avoid overlap with Olympics or football, World Cup. It's pretty set in stone. And cross, yes, we have classics, but those classics also shift date. I'm not against a shorter World Cup. 12 is fine. I'm not against putting it in a shorter time frame either. I think a positive point is the double weekend. I've said this before. I think it would be helpful, it would be useful, it would benefit the World Cup if they made them. We have a double weekend Hulst-Zonhoven, and we have a double weekend Maasmechelen-Hogerheide. It's not the first double weekend. We've had a double weekend Rukve-Namur before. That was relatively successful, at least in terms of riders showing up both days. I think there's potential in it here as well. You reduce the costs. If you're a rider from France or from Spain or from Italy, it's cheaper to just come for those double weekends rather than need to travel back and forth between your home country and Belgium/the Netherlands. So I think that's good. At the same time, I do still have questions about the dates. We see that in cyclocross, regardless of World Cups or not, this has been a big thing for a very long time, and it's only become more important, the mid-season training camps. Really, in December, it's either the first or the second week, especially the second week. You see that a lot of riders go on training camp. They need to rebuild their endurance base, or if they're focusing on the road, they need to start building their endurance base, their really big endurance base, for the road season. So, on one hand, we shorten the World Cup, and the goal of this, it has clearly been stated, is to make the sport more hybrid, more robust, more dynamic. I agree with that. You need to change to the times, and we see that cyclocross is more and more becoming a sport that is combined, multidisciplinary approach. I think that's good. At the same time, if we accommodate for them, but we put a number of races on dates where they will be on training camp, but additionally you will see the full-time cyclocross riders also being on training camp because they've already had a long season, I wonder how that will work. That's my only question mark, and that really regards the races in the first and second week of December, so that's round 2 and 3 of the World Cup.
I think it depends a little bit on how the riders will plan in their season right now, because when is the cyclocross season going to start? When are the riders really going to take the races more seriously? I would definitely suggest that we are going to see similar to what we have seen last year as well, where the riders, in probably the second week of December will do their training camp, because most of the road teams are going to have their training camp in that period. So, and there is not really much you can do as a rider to avoid that, or not to go there, I guess. And even the cyclocross riders, we've seen it with multiple riders that maybe have a very good October and November especially, and then when they enter December they feel that they need to rest a little bit. And especially if you look how packed the racing will get into the Christmas period, I mean, there are definitely going to be some riders that will try to maybe get some rest and then enter with just that little bit more, and see if they can have better results in. So it's for a part that definitely has to do with the placement of the races, but I think for another part you can look into I wouldn't even say the riders itself and how they look at the races and the planning itself. And I think that there maybe there has to be some sort of a a combination of the two to find a way where it would suit a little bit better. But I don't know. For me, it feels like those races are definitely always will have some, riders that will skip it. But at the end of it, it's you cannot leave those weekends and not race at all. I feel so. I don't know what would be the solution.
I think it touches on a broader problem. Like the discussions are really centered around, oh, we can attract Mathieu van der Poel, Wout van Aert to start their cyclocross season earlier because they can race for the World Cup overall. I don't think that's actually possible. I had this thought a few seasons ago before they really, really pushed through with the road. But I think it's just impossible to attract those riders with the World Cup. The money involved is not significant enough. It's a lot of travel. The prestige of it is just lower. They would rather win A3 on the road or Omloop on the road than a World Cup cyclocross race. And I can fully understand that. At the same time, maybe you can attract a rider like Zoe Backstedt to race a full World Cup calendar because of this. So it's definitely not without cause, but it's just tough to see. I mean, the race in Oristano, it's on Sardinia. The weather there is apparently good. Maybe they hope that riders will go on training camp there. And then the full-time cyclocross riders, because there's no way the road teams are going to do that. But it's just hard to see that. And I don't really have a perfect solution for it either. But now let's go into the venues we're going to, because that's really what most of the shock has been about. You've already said this, on 50% of the races in Belgium, 66% of the races in Belgium or within 10k from the Dutch border. That's not a great look for the internationalization of the cross. Let me first take away one of the myths. One of the myths that's been going around a lot is that the UCI Flanders Classics have axed a lot of international races. That's not true. Tabor is not on the calendar. Why is Tabor not on the calendar? That has nothing to do with the UCI Flanders Classics not wanting Tabor. It's because Tabor simply couldn't turn it around. If you look at the last time they organized the World Championships in 2015, they took a sabbatical the year after. Organizing the World Championships is a big ask financially. Sponsors contribute extra budget towards that, which means the year after the sponsors need to recover from their budget put in. But the volunteers, the people organizing the event, also need to do that. It was simply too much of an ask for Tabor to turn that around. We've seen it in Belgium, where Lokeren couldn't turn it around after organizing the Belgian Championships to organize an exact cross in September. And it's a similar thing for Tabor. Then Troyes is missing. Troyes, France, a lot of races are funded through local subsidies, and you get them every other year. So Troyes didn't put in a bid. They're organizing a race in the Coupe de France this year, which is cheaper. Then Waterloo. It was always going to be tough for an American race or a North American race to be in the calendar in the new format. But Waterloo itself, there were already doubts about the continuation of that event. There have been big budget cuts at Trek, the new format, everything together probably doesn't really work. My understanding is that Waterloo is going to host a normal UCI weekend in September somewhere. Then Val di Sole. Val di Sole also didn't get axed. Val di Sole didn't put a bid in. This is where we come in my frustration. And Val di Sole is the prime example of that. For the past 3 years, they've been shoved with the worst date on the calendar. All riders were in training camp. Many didn't come. Start fields were tiny. It becomes hard to attract a crowd, especially if you're in a remote area like Val di Sole. Val di Sole is organizing the Mountain Bike World Championships in 2026. For them, it's simply not worth the investment anymore because they didn't see the reward. Their spectator numbers were declining each year. And my understanding is also that this is the big holdback on the calendar. Why did it take so long for the calendar to come out? Val di Sole wasn't on the calendar. Tabor wasn't on the calendar. Waterloo wasn't an option. The UK, there have been big talks in the media again. Glasgow, big interest. We're talking with 6-7 cities in the UK. Nothing finalized as we can see on the calendar. Dublin, there were big question marks around that race as well. The spectator numbers there last year were not good. My understanding is that they eventually persuade Dublin to continue, but they couldn't persuade Val di Sole to continue, so they really needed to find an alternative for Val di Sole, and that became Orsinano, which is on Sardinia, and I still can't pronounce it even though I've tried it 10 times already. The options are just not there, Issam. It just looks like we are in two different realities. On one hand, we have Flanders Classics, UCI talking big after the World Championships in Hoogrijden. Oh, we're going to go to Hong Kong, Joburg, New York, Glasgow, London. And then on the other hand, we have the reality, which is what we have on paper. It's a big step backwards. We're going to 6 countries, which is the bare minimum. But the only time we're really leaving the Dutch-Belgian postcard is for 4 races: France, Spain, Dublin, and Italy, which is a completely different reality than the one that they try to portray every year again in the interviews. We have so many options, so many countries, so much interest. I haven't really seen it materialize, and I get that it takes time, but I've been listening and reading these interviews 3-4 years already, and we've seen some effects, like Benidorm is successful, but then like their other big success story, Val di Sole, is already disappeared again. So what world are we living in?
I don't know what world we are living in, to be honest. But, it's for sure, I think what didn't help was the fact that they had to reduce the amount of races to 12. I think that really hampered the plans that they had, and didn't really give them the breathing room that they would have liked, in the sense that, if you had 16 races and 6 of them were in Belgium, it was still maybe a little bit too much. But at the end of it, you still had, you had multiple other races that you could have went to. Question is if you would have been able to find that. But I think that some things could have been possible. But obviously, if you look at the calendar right now, it's definitely not what was in the planning and what was announced and what they really wanted and the goal, and they didn't achieve that. And I think, last year we kind of had a similar reaction, in a way that we said, okay, well, it's not the greatest calendar, but at least we are seeing some steps. We are hopeful. It's getting there, and now it's really 1, if not 2 steps back. And you look at it and you're like, what can actually change? And there is not really perspective if you look at the calendar at the moment. It's really a calendar in which, you have those Belgium races, which I don't know if we are going to see them, all of them, next year, but it wouldn't really surprise me, because the relationships with all those races, in a way, is somewhat good. I don't know about the relationship with Namur, but overall I think that they managed quite well. And I mean, the Dutch races with Huls and Hoogrijden, also the relationship seems to be very good. I don't know, where are you going to place the international races anyways? Do you have to again make the amount of races, add a couple more races to it and become again a calendar with 14 races? I don't think so. That would be a bit weird if you try to comply with the riders and then, because of reasons, you make it again 14 races. I think that the riders, if they would be happy with what they have right now, would not be happy if you again try to add certain races to it. So it's so weird in a way that we are in a situation right now that we need to be happy with the fact that we have Dublin and Benidorm and Besançon also, and maybe we get that race in Oristano in Sardinia, which, I mean, I think would be a good option, but I don't really know what the point is of going there, because I don't know much about Sardinia in the way of how cycling culture is there, and if it makes sense for the riders to go there, and how the transfer will be, because I probably have to go with the ferry from France, and you have the race in Dublin before, which is not going to be very easy in terms of transfer. So it's, these things kind of, they are annoying, and when you look at it, you're like, what is next? What is the next step that we can see happen in the future? And it's, when I think about that, I don't really have an answer, nor do I really know where it's heading. And it's the objectives of Flanders Classics and the way they were talking about the future and about the World Cup and what they wanted to achieve. If you look at it right now, it's far from, not even close to what they really wanted. And I don't know what will change this. And I think what really also, I wouldn't say bothered me, but the way the Belgian media, of course, it's full road season. The attention in cyclocross is probably on a minimum at this point. But just the way they were talking about it, as if, they were really focused on the fact that there were only 12 races and not really focusing on the fact that there are no US races, or kind of said it in a way as if it was a good thing almost that it's not on the calendar anymore in terms of Waterloo. And, try to be like, oh yeah, well, we'll see what's going to happen. Sardinia is maybe an exciting thing, and let's see how this calendar will play out for the riders. And in a way, I can understand it, because for them, obviously, the Belgian races are the most important. But it just feels as if we are missing the point of what do we really want to achieve with this sport. And the sport is not really growing with this. So, we'll see what will come out in the future. But yeah, at the moment, it's a bit... we'll see.
Well, Issam, I can answer a couple of your questions. The Belgian media, we can link everything, almost everything can be linked to that race in Oristano. You say you don't know anything about the cycling culture in Sardinia. It's pretty much non-existent, especially a cyclocross culture. And how does the Belgian media think about this race? They think about this race from the Belgian perspective. Oh, well, they just replaced Val di Sol, maybe riders complain about too many crashes, and Issam, what do they say in the Belgian media? It's good that we go to Oristano. It's easier to convince cycling fans from the Netherlands and Belgium to go to the sun in December than to the snow in Val di Sol. I just asked, in what world are we living? Well, I can tell you for sure in what world the Belgians are living. They are living in a world where they are the only relevant ones. Cross is for them. They love to press two buttons at the same time. Cross is dead, it's only something in Belgium, but on the other time, after the World Championships in Hoogerheide, cross is booming, super format, this is it, we're going to explode, it just needs some more attention and we're going to be there. But most of the time, it's really just that story of Belgium is the church of cyclocross, we're the chapel of cyclocross, it's about us. But I don't want to be covering a sport, be in a sport where we need to have these non-Dutch and Belgian, the quote-unquote foreign races, be in function of Belgian spectators. Because this is also what annoys me. When we go to Benidorm, in the Belgian media, oh, there's so many spectators, but so many of them are from Belgium. They're just Belgians who are in Benidorm. Cut that crap, man. Benidorm is a race where 75-85% of the spectators are Spanish. They come from the Basque Country, they come from Valencia, it's the Spanish people. Yes, there's a couple of Brits, yes, there's a couple of Belgians, yes, there are Dutch people, but these quote-unquote foreign races should not be in a function of attracting Belgian and Dutch cyclocross fans. They should be focused on reviving cyclocross in those countries, go to places with passion in those countries, like you see in Benidorm, and Sardinia is not really the place to do that in Italy. But I'm becoming too pessimistic again. I'm just gonna revive a bit, gonna take a bit of fresh air, and leave the other points for a bit later.
I don't know how to fix that, to be honest. I mean, I think the positive that I can take out of the calendar and the locations, in my opinion, is really, in a way, the relationship that they have with Benidorm and how they have taken care of that race. I think, especially for the elites, it's, in my opinion, it's a formula that has been proven to be working now for a couple of years. And in a way, it's great to see it again on the calendar, which for me, it wasn't really a surprise. It's a okay course. The organizers are very, motivated in a way, and there is some money in there. Flanders Classic seems to have a very good relationship there as well, and some interest. And I think that, that is a positive, and we need to see a little bit more of that, certain initiatives being taken. And if I look back at the relationship with Val di Sole, it felt like a forced marriage in a way. It was like, everything was. It kind of came out of this whole idea of, trying to become an Olympic sport, and a sort of I wouldn't call it an experiment, but in a way it kind of was, where they try to, you know, go with this plan of riding on the snow. And I think it was exciting. It was great, and I think a lot of fans really loved the view and the racing. And I think it was great for the sport and a great addition. Of course, there were certain riders that didn't like it, but you will have that with certain course over the course of the season for sure. So I think that it was great to see that as an addition on the calendar, and it's a shame that it's left. But it almost feels like Flanders Classics, in a way, for sure they did want to have it on the calendar, but they only wanted to have it at a certain amount of effort in a way to keep it on. And it's kind of brings me to the next point, which I know you are definitely going to be fed up about, which is kind of the contracts that we have running now with, most predominantly Dendermonde and Maasmechelen, that they are still on the calendar.
Well, before we go to the contracts, I still have a couple of thoughts to vent here, because, yes, as you say, Benidorm is a good case. And you said earlier you don't really feel like there is a vision. Where is the World Cup going? Last year we said, okay, the World Cup calendar is stagnation. They need to make it more robust. They need to consolidate Benidorm. They need to consolidate Val di Sol, consolidate Dublin. But that hasn't happened, because we see, okay, Benidorm has been consolidated. Last year was a success. But we can't say the same for Dublin. That race is squeaking after a disappointing number of spectators last year. The race in Val di Sol is squeaking so much that it doesn't even make the calendar this year. In Dutch there's a saying, je zaait wat je oogst. It means you harvest what you've put into the ground. And I think that really goes for Flanders Classics. In the past couple of seasons, they've given the best dates to the Dutch and Belgian races. And there's political reasons to that, there's financial reasons to that. But a lot of the flyaway races, the American races were early in the season, but Val di Sol, Dublin, Tabor, all of them have not really received the star treatment. They've had relatively poor dates with poor chances to attract the start field that is competitive. Those races feel that. And I do think that that is a big flaw of the past couple of seasons. The state of cyclocross in terms of international races, just races not in the Netherlands and Belgium, is not that good. The number of race organizers able to put on a big event is minimal. If we look at the World Championships, the 2027, 2028 World Championships have not been awarded yet. There is a shortage of organizers. There's talks about Hogerheide organizing 2028. That's 5 years after they organized, no, 6 years after they organized in 2022. In the middle of that time frame, there is another Dutch World Championship in Hulst. There are really not that many international organizations that can get that money together. And instead of trying to help races like Dublin, help races like Val di Sol to potentially organize a World Championship or stay a robust organization, they're doing the opposite. They give them the crappy dates. It's harder for them to attract spectators. In Belgium and Netherlands, where cross is super popular, it's easier for Elie Iserbyt and Lars van der Haar to attract a crowd. Nothing against those riders, it's just unfortunately the reality. The other races are more dependent on the superstars from the road to attract a crowd. And then they don't do that. So we still see the same this year. Dublin, Sardinia, not the best dates. Besançon in the middle of the Christmas period can be vulnerable. Riders skip a lot of races. They might not fancy a 10-hour drive to Besançon and 10 hours back. It becomes ever more complicated for these race organizers to exist, and there's no mechanism to keep them involved. World Championships in Bogense. After the World Championships, that race disappeared. There's nothing there. There needs to be more of an incentive for them to keep organized. You need to try and maintain them, and I know that's difficult and that's not easy, but something needs to change. And that's also why I'm extra fed up that Flamanville is not on the calendar. That's the only thing I'm really, really angry about. Flamanville is one of these race organizers that can put on a big event. They have a budget north of $1 million. They had a budget of 1.2 million last year. This is not a race that didn't put a bid in this year. No, they put a bid in for the World Cup, but they're not on there. And I just cannot understand that, because this is a race organizer you should be patting on the back. You should make them feel welcome. Oh, yes, come in. Oh, we give you a good date. We'll need you in the future. Oh, Flamanville, 1.2 million. That's like 4 times the budget of normal World Cups. Most are around 400 to 500,000 euros. They're easily way above that. And then you do this. I just cannot understand that decision, and it's not a good look, because you will need a race like Flamanville. I'm not saying it's disappearing from the calendar now, but they had the assurance of money this year. You don't know what their sponsors do. They might say, well, yeah, we promised you money last year. You didn't give us an event, so we're going to sponsor something else. I cannot understand that decision at all.
I kind of can, but I know what you mean. But for me, it's like, what race should have been replaced with is probably the biggest issue. I think that you cannot. If you look at the entirety of the calendar, there's probably not a single race that you can really replace it with. Apart from probably if that doesn't really get through in terms of the racing in Oristano, Sardinia, you can probably add Flamanville there. But we already kind of discussed that date overall is not the most ideal date. And I think that is, in my opinion, mainly the issue that I have with the entirety of how this calendar is working out. Is it just feels like it's kind of trying to help your neighbors out in a way, in which the Belgian races kind of get the better, the better positions in the calendar, because we know that we can make some money out of that, and the races in abroad, in a way, if we can speak from that perspective, we don't really care. We fill them up. We use them in a way. I feel the way that they are looking at Dublin, despite the efforts from Dublin itself, and how I feel about the racing there is, it looks great. The racing is good. It's great that we have racing up there, but it still kind of feels like France Classics is like, okay, well, it's great that we have you on the calendar and we can use your name, and but other than that, we don't really care. We focus on the Belgian races because we know that we can make the money out of it. And you can just do your thing, and we add you on the calendar, and that's it. And then we can use you for our internationalization, talk, which at the moment is only talk and doesn't really show it in terms of what they have put on in terms of the races. But I think that if you look, I don't know if you want to do that already, but if you look into what could be done in terms of making this better, is you most likely need to drop a couple of Belgian races, but you also, which is probably more important, is you need to look into how the negotiations with the races will be held, and how you make sure that you are not going to be treating the foreign races differently from the Belgian and Dutch races, which is going to be super difficult and probably impossible. But something needs to be put in place to a certain extent where we can see that the races will get more importance in a way, because I think a race in the UK will only work, or most likely work, if you can make sure that the best of Britain can start there. A race in Hungary, for example, I'm just now hypothetically speaking, will most likely only work if you have a Vash starting there. So it's those kind of things, the stipulations need to be put there in a way, and it's going to be super difficult from here to find the way back up again. But in a way, I don't know why, but I feel hopeful in the sense that I still think that you can turn it around, but it's going to take something. And if they keep on going like this, I don't think that it's going to change much, and in 2-3 years we'll still be talking about the calendar not being too international and still having too many Belgian and Dutch races, which in my opinion would be a big shame.
Well, you are the eternal optimist, and I do agree with you. It is possible to turn it around, and you can start rebuilding from here, but it will require some change, because it's also interesting. You mentioned some stuff about the contracts and where should Flamanville have been. Well, it could have been there instead of Namur. Namur said in the media they had doubts about continuing in the World Cup. They eventually did it, but Flanders Classics, I think they keep Namur in because they don't want to get on full war foot with Golazzo, where, oh, there's none of our races in the World Cup and Namur Classic, they want it to be in. But in terms of contracts, it's also interesting because on one hand you have the UCI and Flanders Classic saying nobody is certain of a place in the World Cup. Nobody. No. Nobody is sure. On the other hand, you have race organizers saying they've signed multi-year contracts with the World Cup to be assured of a date, or in case of Gavre, even be assured of a certain date, the 26th. The others are sure of a place. So that's pretty conflicting. And I wonder in what way that leads to any potential arbitrage. We've already seen it in the past where the Super Prestige aligns better with the World Cup than the X2O trophy. Super Prestige is organized by Flanders Classics, just like the World Cup. We've seen that Flanders Classics maybe does not have their interest aligned with the UCI. The UCI wants international cyclocross. Flanders Classics needs to earn back their organization fee, which is north of $1 million. So they give their own races in the World Cup better dates. We could see as soon as they took over Zonhoven and Antwerp, both got moved to prime dates, so they could earn a good sum of money from those races. More money than if they would have been in, say, October or November. So that's a bit curious there. I'm not saying Flanders Classics is fully using everything they can to benefit themselves financially, but we should be alert and wary of the possibility that they can do that. They have said in the past in the media that they want to push the X2O trophy out of business. So we need to be wary about the fact that there is the possibility that they do that. I would hope they don't use the power of the World Cup and the UCI legislation to do that, but I will always keep it back in my mind and evaluate to the fact that this is a possibility. I know how big business works, unfortunately. At the same time, Issam, you said, well, there is more that needs to be done to protect these races. This year we have this protected status of a number of races. This basically means that races in the protected weekend will be protected, and they can be protected because the UCI can ban other races from the calendar in the weekend of that World Cup. So that means that they can ban a Super Prestige or X2O or Exactcross or any other race from a protected World Cup weekend. The protected World Cup weekends are Dublin, Oristano, Hulst, and Besançon. I wonder why Hulst has that status. That would indicate to me that they also want to take action against potentially Italian or Spanish races. I find it extra curious in line with what was said around this reform. They said the World Cup should be smaller, it should be more international. Well, that more international certainly failed. But they also said the protected status should be for the international races. We can't really classify Hulst as one. They also said that the Christmas period should be centered around Belgium. Then they placed Besançon there, which means that Loenhout and or Diegem will need to find different dates. That doesn't really center the Christmas period around Belgium. At the same time, I think it's good something is being done, but can we even say anything useful about this legislation without the rest of the calendar being announced and without actually even knowing how we should interpret that rule? Because the wording of that is a bit vague, especially considering the fact that I've been told that it applies the weekend and the rule only states day of and day before the race. So since Hulst is on a Saturday, that would also involve the Friday, but nobody's going to organize a race that Friday. So I don't really know if we can say anything useful about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that it will work out for them in the sense that we won't have a Super Prestige or XO trophy race, or even an exact race in the same weekend, which, you know, I'm kind of in favor of, I would say, because I think that it might actually push certain riders to make the travel. I mean, Dublin is still a transfer that a lot of riders kind of whine about, so I don't know how that will work out. But if the riders kind of, you know, they don't really have that option on the Saturday, they are probably not, I guess at least, they're not going to already start with their training camp the 1st of December or that week before. So it feels that actually would work. But you know how the UCI interpreted, or what we eventually will see, I really have no idea, because as you said, it's kind of mixed ideas that we are getting out of this whole protected status that these races will get. But if it's going to work the way they want it to work, and it means that then we will not see a super season nor an X2O trophy race or or an exact cross, then I think that will definitely benefit those races, and that is one of the positives, I have to say. I think it's, in terms of having that monopoly, it's not great for the other classifications, but I feel that the World Cup, in my opinion, must have some sort of a special status. I feel that they especially with the, maybe force the riders in a way to prioritize the World Cup over the other classifications is not per se a bad thing, in my opinion. And certain riders will definitely not like that idea, and we'll probably hear about that when the season is getting closer and closer and we know more about the other races also. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see how that will play out. Also, it's crazy that we got all these, we got the information about the World Cup calendar, yet we are probably with even more questions than we had before, and how this season will play out, which I think is kind of interesting, and also telling of how where the sport of cyclocross is at the moment.
Yeah, more attention will come, and there will be complaints from riders. I think you and I both know who we will hear being most vocal about it. But then in Belgian media, we can already flash forward. I predict that it doesn't take all too long, maybe a week or 2, 3, at most a month, until we hear Belgian race organizers complaining, oh, it's hard to find a date, the World Cup forces this or that. Complaints aren't going to be about, oh, we need to do a crazy transfer from Dublin all the way to Sardinia, which involves 2 ferries and a 12 or 14-hour drive from northwest of France all the way to the southeast of France to catch that second ferry. They're going to be about the World Cup monopolizing this or that, and just not enough perspective because they block dates with the international races. That's what their complaints are going to be about. It won't take long before those stories start circulating. And Issam, I wonder, what would your reaction be to them?
You know what? I will actually kind of give them some slack for it, because we have to be honest, Flanders Classics didn't give them, in my opinion, not enough time compared to other years where they obviously already, we knew kind of the calendar, how it would take shape around the World Championships, which is definitely not the case at this moment. So I would understand the complaints a little bit more, but what I wouldn't understand is the fact that they kind of already knew that this was going to happen, because there were already these kind of rumors going into, I think even before the end of the season, we were already hearing about this stuff, that they will probably go for a reduced calendar. I think Van den Abele led already, he talked about a reduced calendar already, and that we have to focus more around the Christmas period. And I think, what he stated back then definitely came into fruition with the calendar that we have in front of us right now. But it is, I don't know how I should really take that criticism in. I hope that it's not going to end up in some sort of whining where they are going to be crying about the whole situation and not really come up with a solution for themselves, and just stick around with the things that they have been doing for years now. Like, that would really piss me off in a way, if they are not going to adjust and adapt to the situation and make the best out of it. I would really love to see something different from the X2O and Golazzo. That would really make my day in a way, to, I would say, fight what is currently the situation. I would really like that, but I don't know. I think that would be a little bit too far fetched for them, and I don't really see that they have the capabilities to do that within their group. So it's probably going to end up only with whining and crying and complaining about the situation, but not really doing anything, and eventually ending up in a similar situation where nobody really gives a damn about their competition, and after 2 races we already know who's going to be the winner in the men's and women's category.
It's hard to really draw conclusions based off everything so far, at least in terms of the protected status. I don't really know what it will bring, but let's give it a shot. Let's hope it works. Let's hope it provides into a mentality shift, so we have less of the stories of, oh, I need to sleep at home with my wife and children and then just drive to my race in my camper van. Let's hope something actively changes there. There's still flaws to the World Cup, but most of them are money related. A lot of things would just be solved if there's more money coming in, but I won't go into that too deep because I know how hard it is to find a sponsor. You can't just find a company that puts in a couple of million. That would solve so many problems because you could have travel fees and those type of things. But we are far from that. But in order to achieve that, I do think it's crucial that the World Cup goes outside of Belgium. In Belgium, there is not much growth potential because the sponsors are already big Belgian or not necessarily the multinationals, but the bigger Belgian companies. A lot of sponsors in Belgium are top 10 biggest companies of the country. Baloise is a very big company. Proximus is a very big company. A lot of cyclocross related sponsors are really big companies in Belgium, so you can't grow much more there. You will need to cultivate what you have in Belgium whilst at the same time try and develop elsewhere. That's simple business. That's how it goes if you want to grow. So let's hope that we can make some steps in that direction. In that sense, this calendar is not promising, as we've said already many times before, but I would still like to touch upon two issues. First of all, the North American races. There's no race in Waterloo. I'm torn on that. I think on one hand, I always enjoyed going there, and the old format, the complaints about money were definitely not a reason to scrap it. The Americans pay a lot more to come to Europe. The same goes for the Canadians. On the other hand, in this format, I can also just see the difficulties, and you also kind of make it easier in this format for North American riders to do a full World Cup. They can peak a bit later instead of for the early season there. They can also stay all the time here. They can do it within their 90-day visum, or they can apply for a slightly longer visum without any major issues. It's cheaper for them to be here for a shorter time, so it does also provide opportunities. I'm poor. I just don't really know what weighs heavier for me. I'm torn on that, and the same goes for the youth races. The youth races are going to be held in Dublin, Hulst, Zonhoven, Besançon, Benidorm and Hogerheide. Also torn here. On one hand, I can see the reasoning to go to Benidorm, go to Dublin, go to Besançon, a bit of an international appeal, help riders from those countries, give a bit of a show there. Oh, we can go there. Easier for the host countries to field bigger teams. On the other hand, you do create a lot of extra costs for the federations by putting it this way. Dublin is super expensive because of the ferries. Benidorm is also expensive. Last year we really saw that for Benidorm and Dublin, the start fields were fairly small. Most countries halved their selections for it because they didn't have the money. Again, I can see both sides of the story, and I'm a bit torn on it. I think for the youth races, I would definitely prefer it if they had done it a bit differently. But on the other hand, what other options did they have with so little international races? It would have also been a bad look if all of it was in Belgium and the Netherlands, especially because those host countries can field B teams in the youth races, so double squad. So, yeah, both tricky matters, which I'm still a bit undecided on.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to really come back on the North American situation, the States and Canada also, I think a race in Canada would definitely be possible, but I feel that in the current situation for the next maybe 2-3 years, if they keep on with this form or format, I think that it's definitely very unrealistic to see a race in the States or in Canada in the next coming years, and which I feel is a big shame. But it's it's very difficult because you need the investors, you need the money, and you need the commitment from I guess UCI and Flanders Classics, and at the moment it just feels that it's non-existent. It's basically track and that's basically it. And I would say that if that situation would change, it needs to be from outside, and it needs to they need to come up with some some big papers, I would say, to convince Flanders Classics and the UCI, but mostly Flanders Classics, to commit to a race in the States or in Canada. And I think it would be beneficial. There is a market, but it's just at the moment it looks very complicated, and I don't see it happen. And that would be, in my opinion, would be a real big shame. But I guess it's the reality that we live in at the moment, and hopefully in a couple of years' time, maybe the situation changes, and we can see a race or two races actually happen there. But at the moment, it doesn't really look like that is going to be the case in the near future.
Yeah, we've been over it. Those big papers don't really seem to be there. I mean, I'm still a bit upset about the way Iowa has been treated. They've really just been axed, and this is another example of the UCI not being careful with the limited number of international races they have. Iowa just got booted at the cost of Fayetteville, and then they didn't really have enough of a plan in Fayetteville to continue there. That's really in on the mountain bike, so it just hurts to see so many races fall for lack of communication and a number of reasons. But yeah, I think we just need to hold out and wait a bit. We need to wait for the season to come in flow or come closer to the season, and then the big guns will make their media appearances, and hopefully they will explain a bit more of a vision, because so far I've seen goals, but nobody has really told me how we are going to get there, and their actions certainly do not speak louder than their words.
Maybe because they do not care. I hope
your words.
My words. Yeah, but I mean, I totally agree with what you said, and I think that what I just hope comes out of this, and eventually in the next couple of years' time, is that we can see that the sports keeps on growing in a way. I think that in terms of reach and audience, it definitely has, in my opinion, but it's just, it feels like that we are kind of hitting a limit, and it's not really doing more than we probably could have done with the sport. And that is probably the most frustrating part, and for me at least, is that we just every year it kind of feels like the same cycle. And I think that what eventually is needed is probably some fresh air in terms of both UCI and Flanders Classics. I mean, I think that at the top of Flanders Classics, maybe there needs to be some changes, and maybe in terms of the ones that are responsible there, I think that changes could be made and should be made, and maybe it's the staff that needs to be changed, maybe it's the mentality, maybe it's both. I don't know, but I think things have to change, because I don't feel, as much as I'm optimistic and I feel that we're still not in the most dire situation, it's just I miss, like you said, the vision, and I miss how they are willing to get to what they want to achieve. And it's as if they're really focused on Mathieu van der Poel, Wout van Aert, the mountain bike, cyclocross, road. We have to, focus on that, and
gravel.
And they, they're focusing on all these races. They bought the rights for Amstel Gold Race, and they are doing this, and they're very ambitious. But it seems like it's all a business model, and it doesn't seem like they are like that. The ones that are responsible for cyclocross, I don't know how that company works, but at least that the ones that should be responsible for cyclocross, as if they are, running some sort of a factory with just some employees, and we're just going to make sure that we make profit at the end of the year, and we don't really care how we are going to make that profit. I think that needs to change, and I don't know if we're going to see that change. I hope we do, and if we do, it would only be good for the sport, and I hope that we can reach that moment of that the sport really grows, and that we become more international, and that we see the growth in other nations, because we both are Dutch, and we could say that it's good the way it's going for the Netherlands, but and also for Belgium. If you're Belgian, you can be very positive on how it's going, but I just hope that it can change in other countries. But I think maybe I'm too optimistic and too hopeful, but we'll see what time will tell, and eventually we cannot look into the future. Maybe it will change, hopefully.
I mean, I would fancy a trip to Oristano this summer, or this winter, actually, not in the summer. I would rather go there in the winter for the cyclocross. Does seem nice, does seem appealing to me, but then again, I've been to so many Dutch and Belgian races already. I do still go there, and it's still nice to talk to people I know and hang out and get the extra information. But I, at the end of the day, want to see cross succeed more, and I think for that it's necessary to slowly but surely expand your market. And I guess my main frustration is not necessarily that there is no race in the UK. It's just, I get that it's hard to actually expand into new places. You need an organizer willing to take on the risk, people, etc., etc.
They had 3 years.
Yeah, but I get that it's hard, okay? But then don't present the facts in the media as if you're almost ready to sign. Because that's indeed what you come with your 3 years. If you're telling me for 3 years that you're close to finalizing with London or other cities, so much interest, then you create an expectation pattern for me, which, okay, it had already been tempered before the schedule was released. But in general, you create a pattern of so much attention, so much possibilities, new countries. We can go here, we can go there, we can go to Johannesburg, we can go to Hong Kong, New York. Sky is the limit, cross is booming. And then, if that's the way you're portraying yourself as the greatest Gatsby, and you come up with this, I guess I finally found out the core of my frustration. If that's what you're talking about all the time, and you come up with this, I'll just be disappointed. I can give you credit that it's hard, but then also just be honest in the media, and don't build air castles.
On that note...
Yeah, I think on that note, we should be able to wrap up. We can be back pretty soon, Issam, talking about road racing, mountain bike racing. There was even a mixed relay cyclocross race somewhere in, I think it was Germany, with Loris Roulier racing. But we'll save that for another update. I think we can be back next week. What do you think? We can discuss Tour de Romandie, where Thibaut Nys is racing, discuss Amstel Gold Race, Liège, Flèche Wallonne. There's some more cyclocross racers. We can discuss Federica Venturelli, Valentina Corvi, some Italian talents on the women's side, racing very hard. Some on the mountain bike, some on the road bike. What do you say? Next week we're back, optimistic?
I am. I have time, so that should probably work. We have plenty to talk about, apparently. But yeah, I think that we can definitely wrap it up for now. And if you say so, next week we will be back and we'll be talking on all those points and even more, maybe.
Yeah, who knows? There should be plenty coming through. So, thanks everyone for listening. I guess I failed in my attempt to not be too pessimistic, too cynical about what's going on, but I hope some ranting helps me clear my mind. Hopefully there were some useful thoughts through in there. I think I did some explaining still, some stuff about the races not on the calendar, so I hope it was useful. Long episode. Let's really wrap up now. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will be back next week. Goodbye.
Ciao, ciao.